This show does not provide medical advice. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Anything you hear here should be discussed with your primary healthcare provider. Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the radio show, produced by Passionate World Talk Radio, whose goal is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Marianne Matzo, and for the next 30 minutes, I am your host. Today, we're going to be talking with Mike. Mike was with us a little while ago, and he is caregiving for his wife, Janet, who has really, at this point, end-stage Huntington's disease. And if you remember, Huntington's disease has a variety of symptoms that go with it besides the chorea, which is, the movement, but there is, depression, dementia, symptoms that are seen. At this point, Janet is under hospice care, but Mike's been taking care of her for 12 years now. And so we thought that it would be good to do a chat about caregiving for someone with dementia and how to handle certain situations. And Mike makes a great point. He talks about how there's very concrete ways that people tell you how to do physical care, but the moving target is always the emotional response. How do you deal with questions or comments or other kinds of issues that come up? So welcome back, Mike. I'm so pleased that you're willing to talk with us again. I have a feeling that you might be a regular for us because you're so articulate and knowledgeable about the ins and outs of this care. And I think that people who are caregivers really need to be able to listen to how do people do it, or what are some techniques or things to know. So you were just starting to tell me that you were reading about a woman was asking a question. So what was the question she was asking?
Well, the woman, and this is a story that came from a post that I saw on one of the dementia websites or dementia support forums, and the woman who was relating the story was telling that she got a phone call from her mother with dementia, and she was explaining that she was sitting on the front porch with this really, really nice man, and the girl says, woman says, "Oh, is it your husband?" "Oh, no. This guy's name is Frank, and he's really, really nice." And the woman was asking, "Well, how do I deal with that?" Well, because Frank, that is her father, that is the woman's husband. And how do I deal with this? And one of the things that I told her is like, if it makes her happy, what harm does it make? Maybe best case is for, a few weeks until this phase passes. It gives your mother a chance to fall in love with your father again and again and again and again. And it's not a bad thing, If it makes them happy, fine. Don't sweat it.
Right.
And it's these kinds of things that I think that there needs some more general education among with caregivers, telling them how do you deal with this kinds of stuff, because people, they see things happening like that and they get confused and they get upset and they get worried, and it's like, well, how do I deal with this? What do I say? What do I say when mom doesn't recognize her husband anymore, but she thinks she's falling for him? How do you address stuff like that? And that there was a post that I saw a while back that said that thankfully we've gotten past the stage where in medical care for dementia we where we used to think that if they said something wrong, we always had to correct them.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Like this, like, oh, no, this is not 1945. We're now in the year 2020. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Or I'm your, or like, what do you mean you don't know me? I'm your son. Mm-hmm. Or how can you say something like that? I'm your wife. I'm your wife, or I'm your husband, and we've been together for 45 years.
Or even I can remember back, in the day I was, working as a nurse when we were doing reality orientation and telling people, the truth. And it was so distressful to patients that then we started saying, well, and this we're talking like, I was in Massachusetts at Worcester State Hospital, so it was the state hospital that, in the old days it was called, State Hospital for the Insane. Back then, and this is 79, 80, 81, in that period, they would put people with dementia in the state mental hospital. And so we had a ward of people with all the different kinds of dementias. That's where they were. They were in the state hospital. And that was a group that I loved working with. And remember, there was this one guy who would, say, "Where's my wife?" And people would say, "She's dead." And he would be like, "Oh my God," and sob and then, 10 minutes later, "Where's my wife?" And I said, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah,
why does he need to grieve, 10 times an hour? We don't,
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, my mother had 3 strokes. And after her last one, we were caring for her in Texas. And I would go and I would be talking to her, and she said, and she would start saying, gee, I wonder where mom and dad are, her parents. And she would get halfway through, and she said, "Oh, wait, they're dead, aren't they?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "Oh," she says, "that's the worst part of this whole thing, is you forget. And then you have to go through it over and over and over again." I mean, there were times when I'd be visiting my mom, and she would say things like, "Oh, where's Mike at? I've been waiting for Mike to come by and see me." And I said, "Oh, well, hang on, ma'am. I think I saw him right outside. I'll be right back." And so I would go outside, wait about 10 seconds, and then walk back and say, "Hey, Mom, hi, how you doing?" And she said, "Oh, Mike, you're here." Yeah, and I mean, just let that be okay,
Yeah, I see on those posts too, people get very distressed. My mother doesn't know me. That's okay. She knows your heart. She knows you're a nice girl, or that you look just like her sister, or whatever it is. It's okay. Just be where they are, and there's no problem with that. You can't expect, it's like if you have a broken leg, nobody expects you to run a marathon. Your leg is broken. You can't. And that's the same thing with any of these dementias. It's like, it's broken. Don't expect it to do something that it can't do, meaning the brain. It can't do it.
Right.
So adjust.
And that's actually something that I've used as a simile that I've used to talk to people. If you have a broken collarbone, you don't get angry with somebody because they can't reach the top shelf in the kitchen. You say, "Oh, well, that's part of having a broken collarbone," and you deal with that. You work around it. And the same thing, with this kind of a situation where you just let it be okay for them to be where they are. I mean, it's no big horrible thing that people are going to be upset about or be angry about, or there's as long as you're not doing something that's actually going to injure them or harm them, or it's fine, go for it. It's and you sort of learn those things. And the other thing I've sort of learned is to not take things too seriously sometimes, or to understand, that sometimes damaged brains say things. Mm-hmm. For instance, when my mom was in a nursing home locally here in Texas, she was sharing a woman with a Hispanic lady on the other side of the divider, right? Well, one weekend, the family came to visit the lady on the other side of the room. And when I say the family, I mean the family. I mean, there was 3 or 4 daughters, son-in-laws, kids, grandkids. I mean, it was just this wonderful insanity, right? Mm-hmm. It was one of the oldest daughters. I mean, older daughters. Her job was to, wrangle the grandkids and decide who gets to sit next to abuela next, and these sorts of things, right?
Right.
Well, my mom, she's just recovering from this stroke. Her mind is half, it's like Swiss cheese, and all she hears is all this conversation going on the other side of the room in Spanish. And so her injured mind puts 2 and 2 together and comes up with 5, and decides I must have been on a trip, and I got into an accident, and now I'm in a hospital, and they're with these Mexican people, and they're going to make me pay for their hospital. Where all that came from, I have no idea. Okay. Yeah. And so she starts getting upset. And she starts saying these most horrible, racist sorts of things, right? Oh. And my mom's yelling, and the lady on the other side of the room is yelling, in Spanish. And finally, at one point, the oldest daughter starts to go out to do something, and I stop her in the hallway, and I says, "Man, I'm sorry. I really feel like I need to apologize for my mother. I mean, she's just had a stroke. She's hurt mentally. She's in a horrible shape. She doesn't know what she's saying. You have to believe this is not the woman I grew up with." Okay. Mm-hmm. And the daughter, she just started laughing, and I said, "Why? What's the matter?" She says, "And here I was over there, worrying that you spoke Spanish." Because apparently her mother was saying the same things about my mom. Yeah, but but the thing is, we get each other through stuff like this, right. And that really is the point of the support groups, is we get each other through stuff like this, and we can share stories, we can share experiences. One time somebody asked, was asking a question. And they said, "I don't know if I should ask this question or not, but," and then I said, "All right, look, this is the deal. Any question that starts with, is this common for X to happen?"
The answer is yes.
99.9% of the time, the answer will be, yes, it is. Because, I guarantee you will find somebody else who's had the same experience, the same occurrence happen with their loved one as happening with yours. Right. So just, and that's how we deal with this. We get each other through it. And by the way, given the whole topic of everybody dies, one of the things that a lot of caregivers need to think about is what happens after your loved one dies. What happens to you? And one of the things that I did a post a while back that was called Brain Drain, and what it was about was you see so many posts where someone says, "All right, I've been on this forum for 5 or 6 years. Thank you all for your support. My husband, my wife, my child, whatever died. I'm now going to be leaving the group.
I see that all the time too, and it always makes me wonder about that.
Yeah, and what the purpose of the post was to say, no, don't do that. Is that, yeah, maybe your need may not be there, but there are going to be other people who need to know what you know.
Right.
They need, you have knowledge between your ears that, could, make somebody else's day. That can save them, from heartache and trouble and upset.
Mm-hmm.
I get
too much, sure.
Yeah.
Eating to all the things that because the hardest job you'll ever have is that 24-hour caregiver of a parent or a spouse. It's sort of like it's not how really it's supposed to be, and yet that's how it is. And
mm-hmm.
how do you get through that? People struggle
mm-hmm.
with, is this really how I want to spend my life? Because
mm-hmm.
in some situations you don't really know how long is this going to go on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like, Janet, the first time a year ago, it was almost exactly a year ago, she said, I've decided I'm tired of this disease. I'm not going to eat anymore. I'm just going to let myself go. That was a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then she changed her mind and she didn't. And it was, but the point is that over the past year, there have been 4 or 5 specific cases where she said, all right, that's enough. I'm just going to stop eating. And I'm not going to eat anymore, and I'm just going to go. I'm going to die. I'm going to go be with God.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes it doesn't happen because one thing or another intervenes, or as it turns out, dying, I guess, is a lot harder than it would appear.
Well, it doesn't come. If you stop eating and drinking, it's not like then the next day you're dead. And we've done a podcast about this. It can be 3 or 4 days, or it could be 3 weeks. It's so incredibly variable.
Yeah, and it's like I can remember in Boy Scouts, you don't eat and you can survive 2 or 3 weeks. If you don't drink, now you're down to about 48 hours.
But that's if your body is healthy.
Right.
So
and that's
you can't look at sort of what you learned in Boy Scouts, or what people will Google and say, okay, how long can you go without eating and drinking? Because they're giving you those numbers based on a healthy body.
Right, and having sort of semi-normal levels of activity.
Right.
If someone is immobile, lying in bed, they're going to last a lot longer not eating than somebody who has to get up and go to work every day.
And and people will also say, well, it's so uncomfortable for people not to be able to eat, and it's uncomfortable for me not to be able to eat and drink, and probably for you, Mike. But we're healthy, and we, if we were at the very end of our life, it's not uncomfortable. The body has a mechanism within it where, when you go into that ketotic state, when you haven't eaten and drunk fluids for a while, natural opioids are released. So your body is very, very comfortable. It's not an uncomfortable way to die if you're at the end of your natural life. You and I who are healthy, and many of our listeners are healthy, don't make me go more than 2 hours, please. But our bodies are different because we have some health left in us. So those kinds of things, it's like I always feel very compelled to let's talk about what really happens with that. But that's not our topic for today. So if you I don't know, you probably have a blog about this, Mike, but do you have like your up to, this, 12 years now, like, are there the top 3 things that you've learned in terms of taking care of Janet? Or the big one, exactly one, what would you say to that?
Well, the big one that we talked a little bit about before, about dealing with the changing relationships and being willing to let the relationship change as it needs to change so that your loved one gets taken care of. Because, at the end of the day, that's the whole point of the process, is that your loved one gets the care that they need. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I think one of the other big things is that I see that is so damaging to people is when they get it stuck into their head that once my wife dies, once my husband dies, once whatever disease runs its course that is currently ongoing, then then life will slowly get back to normal. And one thing that I learned a long time ago is that there is no back to normal. Mm-hmm. That whatever experiences you have, they change you. And so that you can't go back to what you were before a particular thing happened, mm-hmm. because even if you go back to that place, or say there's a home you lived in, or a town you lived in, or a place you were from, even if you go back there, it's different because you're not the same person anymore as the one who lived there. Mm-hmm. And because I was in the military, I sort of learned that pretty quickly early on, that you go into the military, you go through basic training, you go through your tech school, you get to your first duty assignment, and then you come to your hometown. You come back to your hometown on leave, and suddenly you realize this isn't my hometown anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's not because it's changed, but because I have changed. I'm not the same person anymore. Mm-hmm. If you've ever watched the Lord of the Rings movies, at the last movie, there's this great scene where all the hobbits are back, and they're in this pub back in Hobbiton, and they're all sitting there, and they got their pints, in front of them, and it's like, and then there's this moment, it's like, okay, we're home. Why doesn't this feel like home anymore? Mm-hmm. And my son and I, when those movies were coming out, we went to see them every year, and that was sort of our Christmas Eve thing, because they were always released on Christmas Eve. And when that scene came on, he was in high school, and I'm watching this, and I start crying. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Why are you crying?" He said, and I said, "Well, someday you'll understand." The standard parent, someday you'll understand line, right? Yeah. Well, my son went to VMI, Virginia Military in Virginia, took his commission in the Army, and he came home at one point after he'd been on his duty for a while, and he got me aside. And he said, "Dad, you remember that scene out of the Lord of the Rings? And I asked you about why you were crying, and you said someday I'll understand." Mm-hmm. I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I get it. I get it now." Yeah. Because you go through things. Well, you always are changed. You come out different on the other side. Right. And that, and the bigger truth, the more fundamental truth is, there's a reason for you to be there. Okay, there is a point to it all. and that as you are developing, as you're becoming this different person, it's because the world needs that different person.
Mm-hmm.
It needs who you are as that different person. So it's so much a matter of perspective.
Right.
Of recognizing that, like in my case, Janet, she's going through changes, where in some ways she's becoming a different person. But I'm also going through changes where in some ways I am a different person.
Right.
And
you wouldn't be this person without those 12 years of being Janet's care partner.
Right.
It wouldn't happen.
Right. And I'm still figuring what that is all going to look like. But on the other side, after Janet passes, who I am then, I mean, there's going to be a reason for that. I'm going to be needed somewhere. That who I am as a result of this experience, there's going to be a spot for me. There's going to be a berth for me that I will fit perfectly. And that just, and so it's. I mean, there's a simile in Scripture which says it talks about people, saying, does the clay say to the potter, "No, I don't want to be that kind of a pot. I don't want to be that kind of a bowl. Yeah, make me a different kind of a bowl. Make me a different kind of a pot." And it's like, no, that's not what. We
try to do that as people, don't we? We say, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that.
That.
But
yes, we do.
Sometimes we need to surrender to it and just be.
Yeah, I mean that's what, like, the whole story of, for instance, of Jonah was about. Where he was told by God, I need you to go do this. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. And through a series of experiences, he realizes that things just sort of work better if you do what you need to do. But it's so I mean that's the big thing is to just realize that the relationship you had once doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
That's changing. It's changing, and it's changing irrevocably over time. Likewise, who you were is changing. You aren't the same. You're at the other end of this caregiving experience. You aren't going to be the same person you were at the beginning of it.
And change is hard, right? And none of us like to change. None of us like to experience change, and yet we do. If we're going to survive in the world, we have to be resilient and adapt and to change. And either we adapt and grow stronger and learn and become who we're meant to be, or we can push against it and fight against it and be miserable in our lives.
I think one of the great moments in the story of Jonah is he tries to get away, and he's on this boat, and the ship is being just tossed and turned and upside down, and the other sailors on the boat, they're saying, "All right, who PO'd their God?" It's like, whose fault is all of this, right? And so they cast lots or something, and they figure out that it was Jonah. Jonah's the one that and we're going to die because he upset his God. And so they pitch Jonah over the side. He gets swallowed by the giant fish, and the rest is history, as they say. But that there's a point where you have to realize that in the very best of ways, I mean, we are not. You're not the only person in the world.
Right.
I mean, you're one piece in this incomprehensibly complex thing. It's like, and that I have no idea how this is all going to work out. And here on Earth, I may never know how it's all going to work out.
Exactly.
But it's going to. Mm-hmm. Because, and we know that because we can look back and we can see history, and that, things work. Things get straightened out. Things get corrected.
Not on our schedule, and not in the way that we think they will be, but they will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For instance, 230 some odd years ago, when a bunch of guys sat down in Philadelphia and wrote, we hold these truths to be, self-evident that all men are created equal. Well, all men back then didn't include, black men, brown men. Also, for the most part, didn't include women.
Well, it absolutely didn't include women, right?
Yeah, and that over the past 200 some odd years, those things have been worked out. So that, and we're still not perfect. We're still reaching for the goal.
We're still working on it, right?
Yeah, but that's the point of having a document like the Declaration of Independence, is to set a goal out there that is too big, that you will never reach, because it is in the striving for the goal is where you find the real value. The reaching for it, trying to measure up to this, outrageous goal that of everyone is equal, which is true, but it's so hard to implement.
Yeah. And I think that that's a great place to leave our listeners in terms of thinking about how you're approaching this caregiver role that you didn't ask for and you wouldn't have probably asked for. But Mike's helping us kind of get a sense of learning about how to approach that. And so, Mike, for that, I so appreciate you being on the show and helping our listeners through that. And I tend to get attached to if you guys notice, I get attached to the people that I interview. It's like, okay, well then next time we'll talk about this. But I think that, if you're willing, Mike, I would love to
sure.
continue to talk with you about these topics, because I think that being immersed in it the way that you have been for the last 12 years is very beneficial for people to hear about how you process and learn from these things. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And if I could offer a potential topic for next time, talking about what has been called ambiguous loss.
Okay.
Where somebody's gone, but they're not really gone.
Right.
Or somebody's here, but they're not really here.
Mm-hmm.
Or
somebody's here, but they're not who they used to be, which is, I think, what you're saying.
Exactly.
Well, I think that'd be a good topic. So we'll do that. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you to everyone who's listening for spending time with us during this show. Everyone Dies. It's going to, one of these days, Mike, it's going to be the Mike and Marianne show, because I keep asking you to come back. You can read our blogs and listen to our podcast at everyonedies.org. And Mike has a blog, and if you look in your notes for this show, you'll see the address for that. Thank you to our producer, Jeannie White, and our CEO, Lillian Caldwell. We produce a new show every Wednesday to answer your questions related to life-threatening illness, dying, and death. Remember, you can listen to Passionate World Talk Radio on Spreaker and our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss on our show, please email me, Marianne, at everyonedies.org. That's MARIANNE at EVERY1dies.org. I hope that you live your best life every day, and remember, Every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.